Welcome to GVFV News. Hi, I'm your host Jennifer Duffy, and I'm here today with Ryan Jeroski, Project Coordinator at GVF. Ryan, you've recently attended the Transportation Research Board in Washington, D.C. Can you tell us some of the cutting-edge ideas?
Oh, absolutely. I was going to say, the TRB meeting, Transportation Research Board, is generally considered the most attended, the largest gathering of transportation professionals annually. I believe this is their 89th meeting, actually. There's usually about 10,000 people from all over the world who come to attend these meetings. A lot of things, you can take a lot of things away from them. Some of the sessions can get sort of overly technical, but I was going to say several things I sort of took away from the meeting. Number one, it seems that the Federal Highway Administration is very committed to reforming metropolitan planning organizations. There's the current threshold for forming a metropolitan planning organization is 51,000 citizens living within a certain district. It's become a bit of a problem in San Francisco, for example, or in California, for example. Between San Francisco and Los Angeles, there are 27 MPOs in a row. It becomes a serious problem. Some of them are just too small to function. Some, for example, if you only have about 51,000, they're one person staff. They can't do public outreach. They can't really do comprehensive planning. It becomes a serious issue, and you have smaller MPOs holding up projects that larger MPOs of 1, 2, 3 million people are trying to advance. So the Federal Highway Administration is really looking during the next Surface Transportation Authorization Bill to reform the metropolitan planning organizations, potentially raising their threshold from 51,000 to 100,000, 200,000, maybe more than that. The second thing I took away, two presentations I saw actually. One was from the Florida Department of Transportation. They were talking about how they use public-private partnerships. In Pennsylvania, we're still working on adopting public-private partnership authorizing legislation. They're called P3s. In Florida, for example, they use P3s. They said when they approach a P3 project, they approach it more as an economic development project as opposed to a transportation project because you're involving the private sector. You're trying to get private money leveraged to advance transportation projects. In Florida, they use P3s generally as capacity adding projects. The Florida DOT really puts a lot of their money towards safety and system preservation, which is a lot of what we see here in Pennsylvania. We're putting a lot of our money towards system preservation, not capacity adding. And when they're looking to add capacity, they often enter into a public-private partnership with private organizations to try to essentially leverage money towards it. Another great presentation I saw was actually by a gentleman from Morgan Stanley who presented on Wall Street's view of the freight industry, for example. The freight industry, I think one of the points he brought up was the freight industry doesn't see, if you're investing in the freight industry, don't invest short term, don't invest 1 year or 2 years. It's a long-term investment, it's a value investment. It's the idea that you're investing in what's likely the future of goods movement in this country, because we're seeing added congestion on the highways. We may see a carbon tax at some point in the future. Gas prices are rising. In 10, 20, 30 years, the only way to move goods throughout this country is probably going to be on freight rail. The U.S., unfortunately, the one thing I did learn, the United States is far behind with bus rapid transit, BRT. Other countries throughout the world are far ahead of where we are. There are awards given out to, from Sustainable Transport, gave out awards to cities in South America, Central America, India, that just have bus rapid transit projects that we do not see here in this country. And I would say one of the final things I took from it was there's still, Amtrak has a lot of high hopes for the next 10, 20 years with high-speed rail. But unfortunately, I think one thing that's going to hamper that, there's still a serious divide between the passenger rail experts in their group and the freight rail industry. There seems to still be this, even during meetings, for example, there was a session on freight rail and there was a session on passenger rail. And after the freight rail session was done, every single person emptied out of the room and someone else came in. The passenger rail people came in. To hear the CEO of Union Pacific say that he's really getting a lot of, essentially politicians are causing him headaches because they keep on coming to him and saying, well, we need to use your rail line for passenger rail projects between 6:30 in the morning and 8:30 in the 8:30 in the morning, and then 4:30 to 6:30 again at night. It causes serious problems for him, and he said, these are my lines, these are my track, I built them. And you can't have that sort of divide. There has to be, especially at this point right now, we're in 2010, there should be a better dialogue between these two industries, and there's just not. So I was going to say, those are probably a lot of some of the larger overarching things I learned. In terms of technology, I would say that vehicle miles traveled tax, it's called VMT. A lot of people talk about it as the future of financing transportation projects in this country. We may not be as far away from that as we think. You see a lot of talk anymore about having to install GPS in every car as a way to monitor how far people go and then how many miles they travel, monitoring them from satellites in space. There's actually technology that exists now using the onboard systems of a car and then attaching a sort of shortwave cellular radio device to that OBS, and then blasting it. Essentially, what it would do is it would essentially send out a radio burst to a cellular tower, every several miles, saying how fast the car was going. Essentially, it'd be a way of tracking where a car is going, and you could basically measure vehicle miles traveled based on that, and then tax. So that was probably a lot of what I took away from TRB. So.
Well, thank you so much, Ryan, for sharing those things with us. And that's all we have for today.